Okay, Peter, over to you.
Thank you very much, Libby, for taking time out of your schedule to join us today and for previously submitting answers to those written questions that we sent you. Just a little bit brief overview of our group that you probably know some of before. Arlingtonians for Our Sustainable Future is a group that was formed in the middle of last year, middle of 2019. We came together out of a concern about what we perceive to be the increasing accelerated growth and development in Arlington in the absence of various kinds of measuring tools to compare the benefits of that growth with the costs of it. And our goal is to engage you and other elected leaders of the county and other residents of the county around these issues. We're not a partisan group in the sense that we're not going to endorse a candidate in this election or any other election, but we are interested in the issues that we previously asked you about in writing and the others that we're going to ask you about today. And our advocacy is really around the proposition that the county believes that before it considers any significant further authorizations of density in Arlington, whether that's via upzoning or other kinds of significant increases in density that are not currently authorized by right, we need to see studies that demonstrate that this is really a good idea, especially in light of all of the population growth that's expected with no changes in zoning and no alterations in currently authorized rules and density. So on the call today, we have several of the leadership of our group, including Charlie Henkin, Rick Epstein, Margie Bell, and in addition to them, we've got Jim Schulman, who's joined us. Jim is one of the leaders of our group, although he doesn't actually live in Arlington. I'm going to call on hopefully all of my colleagues on this call who are interested in asking questions to ask them, and we'll try to rotate around. Some people may choose not to ask questions. I think I'll start out with the first question. Back in 2015, the Community Facilities Study Committee issued a lengthy report about Arlington in which they concluded with a series of a lot of written recommendations. And one of those recommendations was a recommendation that Arlington needed a long-term public facilities plan that would go out over a time horizon of 10 or 15 years and would identify the additional public facilities such as fire stations, schools for APS, additional community centers, and other public facilities that we would need to accommodate the population of Arlington that was to be expected with no changes in density. That was a recommendation that came out 5 years ago. Since then, 5 years have elapsed. The recommendation is still languishing. No such study has been prepared, and you've served on the county board for that entire time. So we'd like to hear what you're thinking now about whether such a study is going to be completed. Have goals and timetables for completing it been set? Has a schedule been set for residents to review it, and questions related to that?
Yeah, thank you. So it hasn't gotten going. I actually think it's a good idea. I've been pretty supportive. One of the issues that we had with the facilities study and the doing the JFAC group is that the schools on the school side have always done an inventory. They have their annual facilities student accommodation plan, their ASF that looks at what needs to be done. On the county side, they actually don't have that. We actually don't have a really complete inventory. We're getting it of what we have. And actually it's been 3 and maybe 4 budget years ago now that was in the manager's budget, was to hire somebody to do that. And I voted for that. I may have been the only board member that voted for it. So it didn't go, so that didn't proceed. I think we did vote that in the budget before last, so that there has been some work done on doing just basically an inventory of what we've got. I will say, I think COVID is changing everything. And we're going to have to take a look at what we need, and look at how we're delivering services. That's one of the things I would like to have JFAC look at, as an overall look, is how are we look at models around the world for how we deliver services. So for example, schools, we are about to embark on, they are about to embark, not us, they're about to embark on a boundary studies for elementary school students. And those are so contentious. I've been watching them the entire 25 years or more that I've been involved here. They're so contentious, they're so difficult, and it's, you know, there we are involved in how are we going to put kids in buildings based on where they live, and everybody's working virtually. So you could be doing your school from anywhere in the country, basically, with good internet, and yet we're obsessing over locations. And we also are obsessing over children needing to be in school all the time to learn, but of course they're not right now. So I think there are going to be a lot of changes in education. We are finding a lot of the ways we're delivering services are different. So I think it's important to take a look at that. And we do planning. The county does. So fire stations, there's a plan out there and has been for a long time. I think the libraries, they're all separate, but they haven't been put together in a single plan. I agree that would be a good idea. I can't give you a timetable for it. But it's something that I'm supportive of. And certainly once we kind of get a little bit of settling out from this virus and the pandemic and see where we are, we can start to kind of gather things up and look at where we go. But right now, things are very much in flux.
Okay, thank you very much. Charlie Henkin, do you have a question? Unmute yourself.
There we go. I unmuted. Hi, Libby.
Hey, Charlie.
Good to see you. In a way, it's a follow-up to what you just discussed. On the 22nd, you'll be receiving a report, I gather, from the Housing Arlington group on the status of their missing middle efforts to date, including the postings of some bulletins.
I think it's a work session we've got on the 22nd, I believe.
Correct. That is correct. A work session. So in connection with that work session, what do you believe would be the primary output from that? I mean, for example, would they be told to go do X, Y, Z and charge ahead? Or what would be the primary output of that work session? And bearing on what you just said about COVID, what guidance would you give to Housing Arlington to continue to evolve their analyses reflecting COVID as the data comes in? I mean, it's very dynamic. It's not a fair problem to hit them with. But what guidance would you give them?
So there's been, I'm looking for my notes, it's that there's so much misunderstanding about what's going on with the missing middle. So what we've been doing is basically a pre-phase to a study. So there's been a lot of research done. There are compendiums out there. We're going to have a work session and basically agree to move forward, and using that information to work with the community. Let me see if I can find the specific listing of the phases, because there are 3 of them. And the first, and we've just done the pre-phase. So then we're going to be doing the study, and we're going to be working it with the community and having a lot of discussions. I think there's going to be a technical working group. They're going to help to bounce ideas off of, and then we're going to get to implementation, and we're at least like 18 months out from the end. So this is more touching base, presenting to us and to the community what they have done on just the basic preliminaries of getting all of the information together, and these preliminary studies were part of that, so that we can go forward. So all of the issues that Arlingtonians for a Sustainable Future are concerned about, that's what we're going to be looking at and studying. And the point of doing that is that we don't have good answers yet on all of it. And we're going to try to get them about what exactly is missing middle, what should it be, what do we want it to be, do we want to do it, and if we do, where is it appropriate? Those are all the questions. And how will it affect sewers and schools? All of those questions are going to be addressed. And all we've done to get to this point is gather information and do some studying to be to the point so we can start actually studying and talking about it. So we're going to be working on this for another 18 months. And I'm basically going to look at, do they get the information that they've got? And I'm pretty comfortable that we're ready to move forward with the first phase, which is actually the study part.
You mentioned a technical working group. So do you have some sense of how large or representative of different elements of the county would constitute that working group? And would it be chosen by staff, or would it be on a volunteer basis like
I
Lee
think
Highway Alliance?
I think the idea now, and we'll probably have some discussion on it, I think it's going to be commissioners and stuff, and it's not going to be a working group like we often have them. It's really a sounding board, and it's going to be using commissions for their technical expertise. But all throughout, people, of course, can be following it and giving their input to us as we usually do, because it's all going to be public. So I think the point is to make it a fairly small group with some technical expertise selected already, looking and studying at the various issues to bounce it off of. So I assume, the Housing Commission, probably some representatives from the Planning Commission, and those sorts of groups will be part of the group, the representatives from them. It's really, again, a sounding board. This isn't a working group to come up with recommendations. Staff's going to be doing the work, bouncing ideas off of them. But this is not a working group as we are often used to seeing them. That's my understanding, and there'll be more discussion about that, of course, on the 22nd.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anne, you got a question?
Yes, thank you very much. I was sort of surprised. I was reading these bulletins, and I'm looking at bulletin number 3 right now. If the idea is to transition, the missing middle would transition between, say, high rises and single families. I think the concept most people have is that you're looking at single family residential areas. Let me just read this quote from the report. It says, outside the metro corridors, in these neighborhoods, 50% of the housing stock is single family detached, 30% is low rise multifamily, 13% is mid and high rise multifamily, and about 8% is what you're calling now missing middle, which is duplexes and townhouses. When looking at this, I was sort of shocked that we already have 50% of the stock that's not single family detached. So are you looking at changing like all the single family detached all the way over to multifamily? I think we already have a surprisingly lower number of single family detached in these neighborhoods. So why do we need something more dense? Thanks.
So what we're looking for, so the numbers that you gave show the issue. Almost everybody is in multifamily, large multifamily, or single family. And there's not much in the middle. Although true confession, I'm sitting in a Arlington townhouse, so I happen to live in, what we call the missing middle. That's why it's missing, it's not there. And so we're looking at it to try to figure out what sort of missing, what kind of would meet, be missing middle that would not be, big, large multifamily or single family. What kind of structures and forms do we have that are in the middle, and which ones look good and where might they go? So the answer to your question is why we're doing the study. See, that's what the study is for, is to answer those questions and work them through.
Why would density stop once you're increasing it? And won't it just transition?
What, excuse me, what?
Is there transit? I mean, the density will just keep on being pushed into more and more neighborhoods and more density as we go along.
No, it depends on how we'd actually do it. So one of the things we're going to look at, should there be zoning changes and GLUP changes to the general land use plan, then changes to the zoning. And that's one of the questions we're going to be looking at and studying to try to figure out.
Okay, thanks.
I mean, that's the point of the study. Many of the questions that you all asked, these are good questions. Many of them, the point of the study is to get to some of the information that can give us some of the answers so that we can make good informed decisions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Rick Epstein, have you got a question?
Can I guess it's about parks, Rick?
Rick, I think we're not hearing you. Guess.
Not seeing you either. In fact, maybe I should go to gallery view. Let me see if I can do that and see you all better.
Yeah, I think in Rick's case, I think it's his
there
mic.
We go. Hey, Rick, there, I can see everybody now. Hi.
So Rick, unfortunately, we're not hearing hearing what you're asking. So for the moment, I'm going to move to see if Jim Shulman has a question.
Hey, Jim.
Yeah.
I don't know that we've met. Nice to see you.
Thank you. As Peter has alluded, I'm a little bit of an interloper. I live in DC, actually, in a townhouse myself, and can see the benefit of the missing middle housing type. However, I am concerned that that the Arlington process not kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater of solving. I'm an architect by training, but solving a planning problem with an architectural solution. And so I guess I'm wondering, where is Arlington County on some of the best acknowledged ways of addressing equity issues in housing? For instance, community land trusts and limited equity housing co-ops. What is the county doing to promote these techniques? Also, changing appraisal processes so that they don't automatically inflate land values. What is the county doing to slow the gold rush of land values? Because my perception is that just sort of upzoning will exacerbate some of those problems.
Yeah, so just upzoning, yeah, might, but again, we're doing the study to figure out how to do this and where to possibly do some missing middle forms, the architectural forms. So the question, that's why we're doing the study, to understand it. So some of these issues that you bring up, Jim, you know, the housing co-ops and things, that there are people looking at it. A lot of it actually we have very little control of here in Virginia, because local government's very limited in Virginia on some of it. I'm not saying all of it, I'm saying some of it. And so we are looking at, so, and then you have to find things that are actually going to work and be able to be implemented. So one of the things we're looking to do is not only do this study and come up with some different areas, but then talk to the developers and say, so if we zone this and do this, will you build this? Will it make sense for you economically to actually do it? So there are a lot of things that can be nice ideas, but if they don't actually happen and, you know, they can't actually happen and be implemented, then they're not very useful. So that, again, it's the point of the study. This is just a study. We just want to get better information. I don't know, did I not answer your question? I mean, we're looking at some other things, yes, but this study in particular is to look at different forms in the middle that are not, and middle gets missed. It's not just between wealthy and poor, right? It's the style of housing in the middle. And then what will actually be the effects if we do it? Because in some cases, maybe developers won't, or builders won't want to build it, won't make sense. In some cases, maybe it will make things worse, you know? So we need to look for and look into it and find out what it actually means and will do, and address some of the systemic issues we've had. Because one of the compendiums, I'm forgetting, I think it was 4, you know, looked at all of the racial background in the zoning and things, which is fascinating and something that we don't want to kind of continue. So there's just there's a lot to be looked at, and that's what we're trying to do.
Okay. Let's go through another round here. Again, I'm assuming, as I was advised before the meeting began, that Margie Bell, who's on the call, is unlikely to have a question. So I'll take a crack at another one. Libby.
Nice to see you, Margie. Anyway.
Peter, you
Yes.
do know that Rick has typed out a question.
No, has he got one in the chat? Let me take a look.
Yes, you might try that.
Yeah, hold on and I'll take a look at that. Just a moment. And I'll go with Rick's question. So this is a fairly lengthy one, but here we go. We have many precedents for utilizing working groups to evolve policies for the county. For example, the Public Open Spaces Master Plan Working Group, Housing Working Group, etc. Why suddenly is that mechanism not being used here? Many of us are asking for such a group, and isn't that even more important where staff has already made it clear that it would be unacceptable to staff if no proposal for upzoning results from the study? Isn't that precisely why we need more of a voice involved in this process through a working group? Libby, and I'm continuing with Rick's question here. Libby, you keep characterizing this as just a study, but staff has made it clear, as well as the entire tenor and scope of other documents that we've reviewed, that the expectation is that some form of upzoning is going to result from this study. So that's Rick's question. Libby, why don't we turn it over to you?
I'll try. Okay, so we made it clear some form of change will happen. I think it's pretty clear what we have right now isn't very satisfactory and isn't meeting a lot of needs. And clearly, I think we all agree, if you want a different result, you have to do things differently, right? So I think it's actually pretty reasonable for staff. I am not at all sure that they actually said exactly that they will be disappointed if there's no upzoning. Maybe they did. I suspect it's more they will be disappointed if nothing comes from this study, no change. And I think we will have change. I think we might be able to control and manage a little better the change that we do have. If you look at things that you all are very concerned about, tree loss, flooding, and all of that, most of that is occurring in single family neighborhoods because we have very little control or zoning. Where we really have control with site plans and sector plans is in the more developed area, and most of those developments that we approve make things better. The water management is better, the environmental is better, and we usually require they plant trees. So there's a whole section of the county that's kind of been off limits. And back in the day, I think we decided our zoning set up that 75% of the county was going to be single family. We're wanting to look at, does that really make sense? And if we move forward, I think we will make some changes in the zoning, as I say, and the GLUP. We got to look at what makes sense and hopefully have a little more control. So for example, a spot where there are two duplexes, right? You know, maybe we make it so, or a lot, you could put 2 duplexes on. And if we don't do that, somebody puts on a huge single family house that makes the same, covers the same lot coverage, maybe even does more. But if we can change some of the zoning and have some requirements for setbacks and for lot coverage, we may actually be able to start controlling and changing things a little bit. So it's a way for us to get to be doing more management. Now on the working group, right now it's a study and we're working things through professionally. We may get to the point where at the implementation stage, maybe at some point then we want to have a working group, but there's a role for residents and citizens, and that's an advising and what are your values, what is it you want. But when it comes to professional expertise, as much as we have professional residents and citizens and interlopers like Jim Schulman with a lot of expertise, they're not working, they're not hired. We have professionals to do professional work. So trying to keep everybody in their swim lane. What should be private citizens with their concerns and their principles and their values and that, and then what should be professionally done, the people we hire and pay. All of our taxpayer dollars go to pay them. So there is just an attempt to keep people sort of appropriately in, if you will, their swim lanes as we try to work this through. And again, it's a study to come up with some things. That doesn't say there might not be a working group or something different down the line, but we're just at the very preliminary stages. At this point, there's not really anything to give residents to study because that's what we're doing is the study. Do you see what I'm saying? So you don't ask residents to do the research or whatever. We get input, happy to have it. But when it's professional work, it should be done by the professionals that are paid to do the work. Does that answer your question a little bit, Rick? You may not like the answer, but did it make sense?
His mic is cut off, so he may have a follow-up in the chat.
I can tell that is like, maybe. There's no, absolutely not. So I didn't get that answer. And then, of course, there's a nice vigorous head nod. I didn't get that either. So we're kind of like, meh.
Well, we'll revert him to the chat. We're going to go through now in another round. So I'll start off again with a question. And in this particular case, Libby, I'm going to read you the answer to one of the questions that we posed that Audrey Clement gave to you.
Okay, let me find mine. Which number is it so I can find mine and I can read along?
It's answer to question number 1, cost benefit analysis and population density. And I'm going to read you Audrey's answer, and then we'd like you to comment on her answer. Cost benefit analyses for new projects are routine for most local governments. Arlington County is an exception. Its site plan impact analysis is perfunctory at best. 2 recent examples come to mind, both reviewed by Arlington's Transportation Commission, of which I am a member, the Keybridge Marriott redevelopment site in Roslyn, and the plan to redevelop Shirlington Village. Though I spoke in favor of the Marriott design on March 5th, I objected that the traffic impacts of 3 other nearby redevelopment projects were excluded from the Marriott's traffic impact analysis, the TIA. The Roslyn Gateway, Roslyn Plaza, and the Ames Center were the other projects. These 3 developments could easily double the traffic at Lee Highway and Fort Myer Drive, an intersection that the TIA says is already congested. A traffic impact analysis that excludes the cumulative impact of all new sources of traffic isn't real planning. On July 2nd, I challenged the staff's claim that Shirlington Village could accommodate even more traffic than generated by its recommended redevelopment proposal without bothering to prepare a TIA. Staff advised that GLUP studies don't require TIAs and that a TIA would be produced during the site plan review process. This is why we see no discussion whatsoever of the redevelopment impacts on schools, green space, historic structures, or public safety in the 200-page Shirlington Village GLUP study. If the county routinely disregards or avoids performing impact and cost-benefit analyses during the initial GLUP planning process, then the cumulative impact of these projects is never quantified or addressed. If elected, I will insist on impact and cost-benefit analyses for every major site plan project, as well as a study outlining the economic benefits of the 40% population increases that staff intends to effect over the next 25 years. So that's the end of her answer to that question, and we'd like you, please, to comment on what she said.
So I think part of it is, she says it's perfunctory and we never do things. I think it would be argued that we do by others, and then we're going to just have to get into the definition of what we actually do and don't do, and I don't think that would be very useful. Our staff do a lot of studies. If I recollect correctly, the issue was that they needed to have some things that's construction go to understand how the traffic was going to flow. And in many things, it's easy. You know, you can start to analyze what's happening. Looking forward is a lot more difficult, but we do that when it's appropriate. And our staff, I believe, has done the look at because they usually do. And you know, all I can say is that you all, and I understand it's just a difference in perspective, but you're always criticizing us for not doing any planning. And I've been critical of the county before as well on things. But when you go back to staff and look what they're doing, it's just a difference in what is considered planning, what is considered analysis, what is considered appropriate. And I have to go a little bit with, I'm not a professional planner, a professional transportation analyst or any of that. But I do know that we continually win awards. I do know that where we have been doing development, things have gotten better. For example, Crystal City, you know, there has been like a 28% increase in, adding all of the floor area, about a 50% increase in population, and the transportation, the traffic has gone down by 18%. It's been improved by the development. And I think then we get into arguments about no, that's not going to improve, it's not going to happen, which gets to the main point. It's much better for analysis to be able to do retrospectives and look how things are being affected. And what we should do is constant touch base to see how we are doing with our plans. Crystal City, everybody was concerned about Amazon. They were very far behind. I think about 40% behind where we thought they were going to be in development when Amazon came. And that analysis had been done about how much population could be added, how much transportation could be added, how much storage, all of that stuff had been done. So I will just argue that we do planning, and that the proof is in the pudding, that Arlington is working pretty darn well. It's not perfect. And that in places where we've really done a lot of work, it's getting better. It's the places where we don't, where in the single family neighborhoods, again, where we have so much trouble, with the lots getting covered and the trees coming down, because we don't have much control there. So I think we're going to have to just agree to disagree. Because you all and I know Audrey often comes and says we really don't plan, and I say we do plan. We win a lot of awards for planning, and maybe they're all wrong and artificial, but in general, Arlington County is recognized for its planning. So, you know, so I think we're just going to have to agree to disagree on that one.
Thank you. Charlie, do you have another question? Unmute yourself.
I think
By the way,
just
I think
noticed
I'm here.
that Rick is there, has a cell phone next to his ear, which implies connectivity. So I would yield the floor temporarily, at least, to my friend Rick if he wants to follow up to Libby's answer to his question.
I guess my only comment, Libby, is you're making a distinction between a technical process and more of a policy process. And this study is really both, just as the PSMP is both. So I hear what you're saying, but not sure that I found it convincing.
No, that's fine. Yeah,
we'll disagree.
We have constant, it's done openly. We take feedback, we do hearings, we get a lot of information. And I think our staff, I checked in with them, they said that you all had a bunch of questions. Any questions you want to say, they will respond in writing fulsomely to what you want to know. So they're very happy to do that.
And I guess my follow-on, at the end of the study process, doesn't the third phase indicate that the board will review proposals for acceptance?
Yeah.
So where would a working group come in?
So I don't know that we will get to one. I said we might, the board might decide. I mean, this is a long way away, right? So we might decide that with something that we need more policy help, more input from the community, and then we would maybe set up a working group. I'm not saying we will, and I'm not saying we won't. At the moment, it's not in there and more than an advisory capacity.
Okay.
And I think if the board decides that we feel like we need more advice from regular residents, then we'll ask for it. But again, I'm meeting with you, I'm talking with you, we get presentations, we pass things back and forth. Staff is very willing to answer all your questions. And what I keep saying is the questions that you raise are good questions. That's what we're working to try to answer many of those questions as we go forward for this issue of the form of missing middle, what we call missing middle, this form of housing. It's not quite real big and not quite real small.
Okay. Charlie, I'm going to go back to you now. You want to resume on your own?
Fair enough. I'm unmuted. Libby, you may have addressed this already, but in your answer to question number one, I'll quote a relevant couple of sentences. You say we've been admired for planning for some time. However, we always hear concerns about new projects. They'll negatively impact our community. This is your answer. Therefore, we asked our staff to provide a way to measure how added projects might affect our community. And this, I think, is a discussion where you've been on the side of the angels for some time. And
I'm going to shut the window. Hold on just 1 minute, Charlie. You might hear the children outside. Hold on just a second.
got it.
They seem to be having an argument. They're preparing to be Arlingtonians. It's great. Go ahead.
So let me repeat then.
Yeah, no, I think it's where we started off, right? With this, I mean, I do think it's generally a good idea. I keep hearing back from staff how difficult it is.
Right.
And I thought we were doing regular reports, which I actually checked out to come and talk to you. And I will say that I looked at it and it was not the impact that it didn't address the impacts that I thought it would. And I'm planning to go back to staff and ask them about that. It's simply a report of everything that we have done, which I mean, can be helpful. But the fact about the impact analysis, I didn't see there. It was my understanding we were going to be doing that, but I have not gone back and seen it yet. So I will ask.
And I know that you and Kristen actually, I think, have been sort of leading the charge to try to have this sort of.
Well, and John did too, when John was here. And I keep struggling a little bit to figure out what exactly is the problem. I do understand the prospective, but we should be able to doing the analysis going back. And I will ask, often I find out staff actually has done it. It's just buried somewhere or not obvious and not in a you know, format that's easy for people to understand, which is a problem. So I will ask, believe me, because I looked at it and I thought I was going to have that answer for you guys, and then I looked at it and I said, nope, that's not it. So,
but here's a specific question for you. On the 22nd or at some other time, would you be insisting that the missing middle study avail itself of measurements that will have hopefully been done either now or 6 months from now or a year from now, or whenever they get around to doing those and publishing those metrics and those measures, and to roll those into the missing middle study as part of the technical analysis?
I think what I'll try to do is bring up the question of that data and do we have it? And then if we have it, I would assume that they would do it. I'd rather not like make a strident statement. I'd rather talk with staff and go back and forth a little bit and figure out why we don't have it and what we might have moving forward and how they're going to get the data. I believe all of the work they're doing is going to be gathering some data that they can work from.
Okay, it was a missing middle specific question that I had in connection with the missing middle technical analysis.
Yeah, well, so missing, it's two different things, I think, because missing middle study is looking at, in principle, do we want to support this kind of housing form, and exactly what is it and where would it work? The issue that I'm a little distressed about that we still haven't gotten to is looking at development in general. It's like all the projects that we approve, but specific projects, because that's what you all have often been asking about. What will this specific project do? And I understand how it can be hard to say exactly what this specific project will do. There often is modeling about transportation things, but it's hard to say exactly. But we should be able to do a retrospective. What is that specific project that we approved doing now? Mm-hmm. And that we should be able to look at so that you can kind of keep track of, so that you can kind of adjust things as you move forward, seeing where you actually are. The 20, you know, hindsight being 2020. But so there's two different things, Charlie, you see what I'm saying? We're talking about an idea of a format, and I don't know how to do specific details on a specific format without knowing what it is we're doing and where it is we're doing it.
Yeah, I'm not making myself clear. Some of those projects upon which they would be doing some measured analysis, as you suggest, would presumably be missing middle type of projects. They could be 10 unit apartments or 20 unit apartments or townhouses, and some of them might be missing middle projects. And in that case, would the missing middle study avail itself of those metrics and measures and analyses that occurred in retrospective of past projects? Would there be a feed into the missing middle technical analysis of stuff you learned from those past metrics?
You mean like looking at Arlington or something? I am confused, Charlie. I'm so sorry.
Well, there must be. There are.
I mean, there are no. The point is, there aren't the missing middle isn't there particularly because it's missing. We don't have it, so there isn't a way much to look at what we're doing because we don't have much of it. We have it in Arlington. We have it in some duplexes, you know, in off Columbia Pike. You see what I'm saying? There's those to look at, but they're all pretty old.
Yeah, but there may be some that will come up that will have been approved in the past year or two on which there would be measurements made.
I'm not sure there are.
If it's the null set, then that's the answer.
Yeah, I think it's a null set. I mean, I think that's the problem.
Okay.
Right now, whatever's happening, that kind of form isn't happening either because we say it can't, you know, it's not possible to do in the zoning, or maybe it's not economically viable. I don't, you know, but that's part of what we're looking at.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, but I absolutely agree with looking at the developments like the Shirlington and the Marriott site, things like that. We should be able to look back once they're built, and other ones that we've done just previously approved that have gotten finished. We should be able to look back and find out how did they, you know, how many children did we think were going to come? How many actually came? You know, all those kind of things to measure up to how it's actually working. You know, traffic, did it get worse? We should be able to do that. And I thought we were doing that, and it seems like maybe we are not, so I have to check on that. Does that help?
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Libby. Let me go to Anne. Anne, have you got a follow-up question?
Yes, I hate to ask another missing middle question, but I'm going
No, but
to.
I think you told me it was going to be about missing middle, right? So, sorry.
So my question, this was in the research bulletins, and I also just heard it from you, and talking about the problems that have been created with the large houses and the tear downs, and that was all throughout the bulletins. But it doesn't look back and say that those problems were created by previous boards because of setbacks and lot coverage and height. You know, we're building very large homes on relatively small lots, and that has helped with a lot of these issues of impervious surface and tree canopy. In particular tree canopy. And looking as well at the bulletins in terms of what Arlington's current zoning is, one of those bulletins noted that the largest zone out there now in residential is R6, has 4,500 acres. Looking at the next two largest zones, R5 and R8. So I'm imagining if you're trying to maximize the number of units, you're going to look at these zones. I live in R6. And one of the staffers was saying we haven't developed in these zones. And I would beg to differ because I live near constant tear downs, constant construction, constant noise, and constant tree cutting down. And I think
I had something was slid across my screen and I missed. You said you beg to differ. With what? Do you differ?
Oh, I differ with the staffer who said there hasn't been development in these single family areas. Well, there might not have been a replacement of one house for two, but there's constant tear downs and constant construction and constant tree loss. So I'm concerned about the tree loss. I'm concerned about the paving, heat island.
Yeah, we are too.
So
we are too.
I'm concerned that if you're going to go to R6, which is what would look like an obvious choice here from looking at the acreage in the bulletins, that we're just going to see this process continue with the tree loss. I don't see how are you going to protect what little green space we have in these neighborhoods. And
right, again, so that's again why we're doing the studies, to look at it and look at with tree loss, because one of the things that I have noticed when you all are speaking is that the extrapolation seems to be the absolutely worst case scenario that we would do. And everybody gets upset about that. But we don't even know what we're doing yet. We're trying to study it and figure it out. And I would hope, I mean, this board member, if it turns out doing what you call upzone or whatever in certain areas is going to lead to a lot more tree loss and stuff, I'm not going to do it.
Would you look at downzoning of the R6 where the lots?
Yeah, we've been discussing that a bit. I have to get back. It can be tricky because then we can get sued and it'll be a taking, and then we lose all control altogether.
But that's what was done in Portland and Seattle, for example. I know it's a different.
Yeah, they're in Washington State.
But this issue of the tear downs is not being addressed, and it's only going to be exacerbated, in my view. You're going to drive up home prices.
Yeah, it's my understanding, I could be wrong, my understanding is the state of Virginia is really big on homeowners' rights, and that we have in the past sometimes lost cases. So we get sued by a builder that we have taken their land because we've downzoned so much that they couldn't really realize their benefit. And then the courts agree, and then suddenly it's all gone. So Virginia is not, the state of the Commonwealth of Virginia is not the state of Washington. And it's just very different, and we have to be kind of aware of that. And I can see, I mean, maybe we're being too careful, but I know there are a lot of concerns. I think as the legislature continues, if we continue to get more blue and looking at more in the environment, we'll be able to do more. We're looking at ways to provide carrots, if there's some ways to do that. And the zoning there might be a way to do this. So maybe you can get a duplex on a lot that might sell for more than one big house, but you can only do it with like certain setbacks or saving trees or something like that. I don't know, but that's what we're looking at. That's why we're studying it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Jim Shillman, do you have a follow-up?
Sure. I'm missing middle for the moment. I asked what I told Audrey Clement was a softball question about opportunities for regional cooperation among governments to solve urban problems and metropolitan problems. And she answered about transportation, but I'd like to ask you, is there anything that Arlington County is doing or should be doing or could be doing in terms of working with neighboring jurisdictions to solve some of these sticky problems?
Yeah, the major example that comes to mind that we've done is when I was chairing the Chesapeake Bay Policy and Resources Committee for COG, Council of Governments. You probably all heard this. I mean, one of the things I realized was trees were a big issue for us, but they were a big issue for everybody else. And I asked in the meeting, everybody, Maryland, DC, everybody's worried about trees. Good thing. So actually we started, there's a group of, a committee on trees that started, urban forestry, that started up and has actually been formed and is underway. Our staff was telling us that one of the big problems is that while Chesapeake Bay ordinances and the legislation, I think it's federal level where it came in, requires builders like to plant new trees. And they get credit for that, for their Chesapeake Bay stuff, but they don't get any credit for preserving older trees. So that the older trees get chopped down. So there's a study, so we took it, I think Maryland went, I actually didn't follow close enough, they went, but we went down to Richmond, and then, we weren't able to get, legislation right away to allow older trees to be, considered as a, get credit for it. But there is a study going on, which this next session hopefully can result in some legislation that will actually protect trees. So that is actually a regional issue that we're working on. Working on stormwater, housing, we're all looking at, housing and affordable housing and what to do. Obviously the transportation, cooperating on that is crucial. I will say it's one of the benefits, there really are a lot of them, which I hope will be what lasts and is remembered from this COVID crisis, is the amount of communication and interaction that's happening at all levels regionally, mostly right now dealing with, testing and, COVID rates and looking at housing and, keeping people in their homes so they don't end up homeless and have enough to eat with food. There's a lot of cooperation going on in food. So does that sort of answer your question?
Okay.
Thank you.
Libby, I think we have time for one more question, probably, and then an opportunity for you to give a closing statement that you mentioned that you'd like to do.
Did I say I wanted to do one?
You said you didn't want to do an opening statement. I thought, I interpreted that as saying you might want to do a closing statement.
Yeah, I might, but I'm not sure I do. If I have something helpful to close with, but I can say thank you. That's fine. Give me your
All right,
expression.
that's fine. So I'll ask another one. You've been quoted a couple of times in the media as saying that you believe that there is lots of misunderstanding and confusion about what the Missing Middle Study's goals are, or what the Missing Middle Study is intended to do. If you could give us your best shot at trying to explain what you think the goal of the Missing Middle Study is, that would be the best way to eliminate the confusion, how would you respond?
Yeah, the goal is to look at, re-examine our zoning and our, the general land use plan, all of our land use, to see, does it still result in a community that fits our values and our needs? And anybody who's looked at our zoning map or our GLUP, you see all these people. I mean, it's a huge conglomeration and patchwork. It's been put together over years and years. And as I said some time ago, they decided that 75% of Arlington's land should be single family. Do we still want to do that? I think probably not. It with some limits. We're looking at accessory dwelling units and things. I'm sorry, I'm going on too long. The point is, does our current zoning and what we do, is it providing the housing choices and diversity that we need as a community? I will argue I don't think it does right now. I think we can do it better. This is an effort to do some studies on how we might do it better, providing a broader range of choices for people and a broader range of kind of diversity of styles to provide that choice. Because what you need as a 20-something single starting out, what you need as a young couple with a baby, what you need as an older couple with like 2 teenagers or 3 teenagers, what you need as an empty nester, what you need as somebody who's aging and is having trouble with mobility. Those are all different housing types that are needed. And I'm not sure that we have the gamut here in the supply that we need. So that's what this study's about. It's to try to be intentional about what we do, because zoning, I think all around the country, it just kind of grew up, you know, it just got, since the 30s, we keep adding things. You know, so some of the planning, I mean, for example, all those streams we undergrounded or allowed, I was way before my time, undergrounded, you know, when all these housing divisions were built, they're creating absolute havoc right now with climate change and everything that's going on. It's terrible. If we were back then, we wouldn't have done it that way. There's a lot we would be doing differently, I think. So we need to be intentional about it, study it, and think about it and do it. I think what I get upset about when at times, and you're probably hearing this, the frustration in my voice at times, is that people, and this is, I will lay this at the feet of this group, seem to assume that the end game is there. We're planning. I mean, when you listen, and I know you don't really mean this, but it feels like what you're saying is what we want to do, what the board wants to do is pave over all of Arlington, build the whole thing up as much as we can, and destroy every tree in the county. Well, of course not. We actually want to make it better. And if you look at where we're really doing a lot of building, you know, and a lot of work in Crystal City and things, and with the plans with Amazon and the Met Park we're putting, it's going to make it better. When we're really working this through, it gets better. That's what we want to do. We want to make it better. And that does not mean chopping down a whole bunch of trees, cramming a whole bunch of people in, and destroying a whole bunch of leafy neighborhoods. We want to make it better. And there is a very little trust in the group that that's what we want to do. And I'm sorry about that, but here we are. So I'm talking to you. Our staff is willing to answer all the questions. We are trying to be as responsive as we can. So that answer your question? Probably far more than you wanted.
Well, I think back to a former president a few times ago who said, trust but verify.
Yeah.
Our group is interested in verification.
Absolutely.
And we're not interested in it in the abstract. We're interested in doing it with very concrete kinds of studies to verify that what some people think is going to make it better will really make it better, or would perhaps inadvertently make it worse. And we'd like to see those studies prepared and shared before we launch into votes and things like that about the upzoning or the changes in density or the increases in housing types themselves. And so the reason there may be some skepticism and suspicion is that some people believe that this process is going to be bifurcated in such a way that people will reach conclusions about the need to diversify housing types without ever examining the costs of the diversification they have in mind.
Yep, fair enough. The votes will be coming, you know, in 18 months or more on the zoning, whatever. So no changes happen until the board actually votes. Lots of time to have input. And right now, the request and desire for very specific studies and specific information is impossible because we don't know what we're actually studying or going to do. So we're trying to find out what forms make sense. Do they make sense? Will it help? And once we get to those conclusions, if we find some that we think we ought to look at, then the next question is, where do we do them in Arlington? And once you've got those two sets of information, then you can start to do some specific analysis and studies. But right now, we don't know what we're going to do, and we don't know where we're going to do it. So it's really hard to give you specifics. Does that make sense?
It makes more sense, yes. Thank you.
And there will be a vote on the board, and that'll be, I mean, it'll be really clear. So there'll be lots of opportunity to do it. But if we're going to be touching base with you guys all the way along, send questions into the staff and ask away, and they will respond.
So we have 4 minutes left, Libby. We can give you an opportunity to give some kind of a statement if you'd still prefer not to do that. Give you one last shot here to do it.
No, I don't, you know, a statement feels strange because I know all of you so well. It just feels kind of odd. I mean, I can tell you, I'm trying very hard to do the best job I can. I think the staff we've got is really good. I think this is a really well-run county. Are we perfect? No, we're trying to get better. I believe that this study is what it is. It's a study. There's no conclusions. And I guess my final statement would be a little bit building on what I said before. I wish you guys would, you know, I mean, it's just, it feels like when we give answers, none of them are ever right. And it feels like we talk past each other. And I'm not sure what to do to fix that. I'd like to, but I'm not sure even this time has done it. But it's a little disappointing to me sometimes about how people are, there's just so much distrust and so much talking past each other. So I'd like to make that better. How's that?
Well, I think we would be more comforted if we had a commitment from the full board that the specific studies that we've requested would actually be laid alongside whatever the recommendations for diversifying housing types that ultimately emerge are done, and that there's plenty of time to compare the costs of the specific changes in the specific areas of the county that ultimately are recommended before there are ever any votes that are designed to validate the benefits of the changes and increases in diversity in housing types compared to what those costs might be.
Yeah.
And so if the county board gave a commitment like that, that might go a long way toward easing some of the concerns that a lot of members of our group have.
Right. But the kinds of studies you're asking for, I think at this moment, they're hypotheticals.
No,
Again, we don't know where we're getting.
Yeah, but what I'm talking about is not hypothetical. It's when you get to the point of making recommendations about diversifying permissible housing types in specific neighborhoods, that there be no sort of accelerated schedule to vote on any such recommendations without doing these kinds of studies first. I think that's the point I'm trying to get across.
Yeah, you're getting some kind of background. Well, it seems to me the point of the missing middle study is to find out the answers to just those questions, so that if we do if we take this form and we put it here, what will be the result? I think that's the point of what we're doing. I do worry when we get there, because I've had this with lots of people in Arlington. It's very typical, battling ways of analyses, battling experts, and that usually gets us not much of anywhere. But the point, I will say that the point of what we're doing now is to figure out what is it we want to do, and if we do it, why, and what's the effect going to be, because that's why we would do it, because it would make things better, and we're studying to figure that out. So it's not exactly the answer you want to give, but I can't give you a blanket, okay, because I'm a little worried about what I will have ended up agreeing to, because it might be a lot more specific, and I'm just not ready to do that right now, because we don't know what we're doing. We're studying.
Thank you, Libby. We've had, I think our time now is actually up. On behalf of Arlingtonians for Our Sustainable Future, we want to thank you very much for having taken the time to answer all of these questions with us. We hope that we will be able to continue to have a dialogue like this from time to time. We, like you, are interested in what's best for Arlington, and we think opportunities to exchange ideas like this are worthwhile and useful. I want to thank my colleagues as well on this call for participating. And that concludes the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all. Everybody stay well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay well.
Take care. Bye. Thank you.